Welcome to Extremely Valid Points.
We are three business owners and friends who enjoy practical, real-life discussions about business, marketing, and creativity.
Your hosts are Nathan and Jenny Sala, the owners of World Light Media, a digital marketing agency focused on helping organizations grow through online leads.
And Dave Wilkins, the owner of Ellipsis Production Co., a video production company that specializes in creating meaningful content for businesses and nonprofits.
We hope you enjoy today's episode. And along the way, we just might happen to make some extremely valid points.
Welcome back to Extremely Valid Points. We are here with Max Debbas for our second part of our conversation with him. We've been learning all about his business with Acapella Chocolates. He also has a podcast. If you haven't heard the first episode, please make sure to check it out because it was gold. And so we're just going to continue the conversation from last week. Welcome back, Max. Welcome.
Max.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it.
So last week you were talking about your chocolate business. You shared all about some really creative things you've done. We've talked about creativity and fear of failing and how pressing in and not being afraid of that has really helped you guys come up with some amazing things. We talked about being in the business with your dad and what a unique and special experience that is, all the good and the bad. I would love it if you would pick up and tell us more about your family background. How did you end up in Fresno? How did you end up with this chocolate company?
Sure. Yeah. So that's it could be a very long story. I'll try to keep it short because that could be a couple podcasts in itself. But my father grew up in Lebanon.
Okay.
My great uncle was the first president of Lebanon.
Wow.
So there has been a good amount of kind of political connections with the Debbas family in Lebanon. But my grandpa in the 70s was the president-elect. So essentially he was elected president. He was about to become president. And certain people didn't like that. There's Christian and Muslims in Lebanon. And so he was a Christian, somebody running as a Christian president. And so as well as there's probably some other things. We actually don't know everything that's gone into this. I'm sure there's a lot of shady things and different connections. Who knows? But at that time, my dad grew up in Lebanon, and he was also very involved in politics. So my dad had a couple other brothers as well, 4 brothers. None of them were involved in politics like my dad was, though. At a young age, he got really involved. He traveled to the States with his father, when he was, I think, like 15, 16, and, met President Carter and did all these kind of diplomatic type of meetings. So when, not long before my grandpa was going to kind of take the office, a group of people came into their house and just killed everybody.
Wow.
Assassinated pretty much everybody in there. My grandpa had died in my dad's arms, and then they just unloaded the rest of the machine gun on my dad. So he was shot 22 times, and they had killed, I think there was like 15 or 20 other people who died in the house that day.
And how old was your dad at this time?
At that time, he was 17 or 18.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was essentially left for dead. They came and they thought he was dead. They had essentially said he was dead, and but he says that he looked up and said, "No, I'm still here." And
Wow.
So they took him to a hospital. And at this time, that was very scary because people were still, when they realized he was alive, they still wanted him dead.
Yeah.
And my uncle, 2 of my uncles were also shot. So because of some of their connections, they got flown to Switzerland to go to a medical hospital there to get well. They were there for about a year recovering. And my dad, his hip was completely shattered as well. So they had told him, you're never going to walk again.
Yeah. Wow.
And he was sitting and praying one day and said, God, you brought me through this. Do you really not want me to walk again? And the only time he has ever heard like the audible voice of God, he just said, "Get up and walk."
Wow.
And
Wow.
he got out of his wheelchair and started walking. When he tells a story, he says he got up and all the nurses fainted.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, and honestly, he still to this day technically shouldn't really be walking. His hip does not look like it should be functioning.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so yeah, kind of crazy. And so at that time, though, he wanted to, as most young Debacle men do, we do stupid things. He had decided to try to go back to Lebanon at that time, but went without his bodyguards. As soon as he landed in Lebanon, a group of people entered the plane and kidnapped him, and he was put into essentially a camp where they tortured him for months. They played Russian roulette with him. He saw a number of people die in front of him. And he was essentially just tortured for months. And a group of people came in to free the camp. He got saved, taken out of the camp, and went and recovered again. And at that point, he just decided it was time to get out of the Middle East.
Yeah.
So he came to the United States. First was in Florida, and then Los Angeles, and that's where he met my mom. They were at Cypress College, and he wanted to study food science. Lebanon is a lot of agriculture in Lebanon, so he had this dream of kind of learning food science and agriculture, and eventually going back maybe to the Middle East.
Yeah.
And Fresno State remember, this is the 70s, so a little bit different than now. In the 70s, they only had a certain number of foreigners who could go to your college. So,
okay.
Oh, wow.
So there was only one or two slots for
In the 70s?
Yeah, so there was like one or two slots open in the food science department for somebody who wasn't part of the California state system or whatever.
Okay.
And so he had applied to all of them, and Fresno was the one that he got into. And so he started studying food science. Him and my mom moved to Fresno. As he was studying food science, he got a call from his brothers who were still in Lebanon and said, "Hey, Guy, you're studying food science. Well, we just found out that our family, because his dad had a lot of investments, had invested in some chocolate factory that is just kind of sitting empty. Do you want to come open up a chocolate factory?" So,
And where was the chocolate factory?
it was in Lebanon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So him and my mom moved back to Lebanon
Wow.
and decided, hey, with our new knowledge and everything, we'll start doing this chocolate factory. So they kind of dedicated a lot of time with all the knowledge they had and started up that chocolate factory. It was called Chantilly Chocolatier, which is actually still running to this day. My
really?
uncles are it's technically, I guess the Debbas family owns it.
Yeah.
And so he started that up with my mom and his brothers, and it got bombed. So
Wow.
I was just going to ask if the political environment had settled down a little bit.
Oh, no, it was a nightmare. Yeah. It got bombed. They rebuilt it.
Wow.
It got bombed again.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
so at that point, my mom realized, okay, this place sucks. Let's get
Is this where the inspiration for the
cluster of
explosion?
bombs. That would have been a better story. I should have.
Yeah.
I'm changing my story now.
Oh,
Yeah, there
yes. We had this factory. We had all these different kinds of chocolate, and then this bomb came in.
And it landed in a
And-
vat of chocolate. Yeah.
The other one and the bin of Pop Rocks.
Rocks fell into it. So then they moved to Fresno. They got out of Lebanon again, moved back to Fresno, along with some of his brothers. And that's when they started their little ice cream shop, which was a little stand off of Blackstone by the old Toys R Us.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
And
It was called.
it was called Foreign Affair.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could find them, you got free ice cream.
Yeah.
Yep. They got their first account with Trader Joe's, and then they eventually moved into a real small little factory. That's the one that I grew up in. It was off of Olive and I don't know, somewhere scary.
Was it scary then or scary
It was
now?
scary all the time.
It was always scary. Okay.
Yeah. And so that's where we were. In 1994, we built our first factory, from scratch, and it's off of Clinton and Clovis Avenue, which is right near City Lights. If anybody knows where that is,
so.
Yep. So
I've never even heard of it.
I always say, because it's the only landmark people know. It's like there's an office park there. They're like, where? I'm like, there's a big Napa Auto, huh? It's by City Lights. Oh.
Right. Well, I don't even know. So Nathan and Jenny, they're from Seattle originally.
Oh, okay.
Maybe prior City Lights era.
Oh, right.
So it was a.
It's you
Is that
still
where
know
there's
it,
a
right?
Budweiser sign over
That's
that
the
way?
other one. Yep.
Uh-huh.
The giant Budweiser sign and the City Lights.
Yeah.
I think there's an airport there too.
Well, that's what I was
But that's
gonna
a terrible
say.
landmark.
So yeah, we're in that business park there. We were there up until about 2017. We built out our new facility, which is also right near City Lights. So
Which was a strip club for you guys that don't know. I don't know if you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We know.
Oh, okay.
Jenny told me.
Jenny told you. Okay. Gotcha.
So we're actually just like 4 streets down in the same park. But we built the one in 94. We built that. It was a 15,000 square foot facility, 5,000 square feet of production, 10,000 of warehouse. By the time we moved, the entire facility was production, and we were operating out of 4 buildings. And we just had trucks driving all around town. We had warehouses, cold storage, 2 different. We had essentially one big production area, another warehouse that got converted into production, and then our own warehouse, and then 2 other facilities that we had trucks going around.
Yeah.
It was just insane.
Crazy busy.
So in 2015, we actually part of when my life went nuts. This is part of one of the bits. One of our largest customers was Target. We were doing almost all the chocolate for Target and Target Canada. And we had a lot of orders going out for Target Canada. And I don't know if you guys know about the Target Canada debacle.
No,
This
not
is
really.
like
I remember you telling
yeah.
me the story a little bit about it. Yeah.
Speaking of failures, Target Canada went bankrupt.
Whoa.
Oh.
And for a business that's just family owned, when you're owed $2 million by Target Canada and you're leveraged because you had to buy everything, you lose everything. Yeah. So we, at that point, we lost everything. We actually shut down the company. My dad and mom, they lost their house and kind of the whole deal. We shut down and literally we were, everybody had left and it was the last day. Most of the equipment was packed up. I was taking down our security cameras. And I remember being on a ladder just taking down, I was like saving whatever I could. I had some new, Google Nest cams. I was like, I'm not letting them take my Nest cams. These cost me $100. So I'm up on the ladder getting my Nest cams and my Ethernet cable, and the phone rings, and a friend of ours says, "Hey, I know a guy who is interested in coming down and investing in you and seeing, and just said, look, we're done, man. Like the factory's closed." He said, "No, he really wants to come." He said, "It's over. Like it's done." My dad and I remember we were sitting in the office, just kind of like last, all right, here it is. Well, we were thinking through, what do we do now? I was like, well, I guess I can go teach. I'm still teaching at the time. I was doing part-time. I was like, well, I can maybe just go become full-time, continue teaching at the college, and maybe start some food consulting and whatever. Phone rings again, and pick it up, and the guy says, "Hi, this is Roger Brown. I need you to pick me up at the airport." And I was like, huh? Long story short, this amazing gentleman had heard about us, and he flew in and decided came in, met with us, walked around the facility, and after he met with us for a little bit, he said, all right, call everybody back in. We're opening back up.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he invested everything back into the company, and we were up and running like literally in 2 days.
Oh
Whoa.
my gosh.
Amazing.
Yeah, really, really incredible. And he was an incredible man, great friend of ours now. He actually we were with him for 2 years. 2017, he decided he's quite a wealthy individual. This is in his mid-40s, decided to just retire and get rid of a lot of things. So at that point, my dad and I took control of the company again fully. And then within a couple of years now, we're working with Made in Nature. But that's at that point when we were with Roger, we moved into the new facility, which we now just expanded. We finished our expansion about 2 weeks ago. So we're now in a 100,000 square foot facility, and we are running out of room already. So we're looking for some more space. So
Exciting.
yeah, it's been a journey.
So
Oh, that's great.
this story is amazing, and I think with your film background and your teaching background, I mean, and all of the elements of the story, I think this definitely has like motion picture written all over it. There has got to be a movie
I'm telling you,
someday.
I
Yeah.
will. I'm going to
You
be a
can-
famous actor, and
It's going to happen. You now have
You can star your father.
that's right.
and himself.
Both.
And
Yeah.
I'll win
all the
dual
extras.
Academy Awards.
best actor and supporting.
Yeah. No, and Max has even done movie makeup for one of
This
our
is
things.
true.
Wow.
Yeah, so you could do your own.
I'll have
hair
so
and
many
makeup.
awards. It's going to
Yeah.
be insane.
And the Oscar goes to Max Debbas again.
Well, I just think it's such a great, for entrepreneurs, it's such a great story. It has all the great elements of, being forged in just tragedy and then all of the innovation, bringing truffles to America, bringing, all of these brand new things that nobody's ever heard of or even tried, and just, opening the doors for people who want to taste great things. That is, amazing. And then this whole chapter of where if you wouldn't have gone back to go get your Google Nest cameras, it might be over.
Right. No, it's true. There's
Yeah.
it really was the 11th hour. Like it was there's no reason for us to still be sitting in there, but it was that was truly a God thing. It was ended up just being an incredible journey, especially meeting some really incredible people, and what a learning experience too, to be just coming, knowing that this is it, we're done, and then within 2 days, just back up and running. It's
Yeah.
a whirlwind, and then just so many things over those next couple of years. And there's really nothing like you don't learn. There's nothing better to learn business from than just being really fully ingrained in like failing in a business and then building it back up, and then failing and building it back up on
true.
like especially on these like big scales. You're like doing $20 million of chocolate, and then you're just done. And then it's
Yeah.
like, how do you get back up from this? And then you kind of, rise from the ashes, and you're learning from some incredible people and just kind of absorbing it all. And it's been a wild ride.
I mean, it certainly puts things in perspective because, we recently got stiffed on like a $2,000 project. And,
Yeah.
I can't even
not the
imagine
first time we
a
got
$2
stiffed.
million,
Right.
just crushes you. And, so I guess we can learn from this, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be
It
okay.
will be okay. Yeah. You just, you don't know where you're going to end up, but it'll be all right. Yeah.
Well, and I think I never thought that I'd want to, be in business for myself or anything like that. But again, it's like you just kind of have to get used to it, and you have those things of, hey, okay, there's no money and whatever, but then somehow something comes in or something turns around, right? And and that just happens time and time again, and you realize that's what business is. It's like you're all the way down, and then you're way up, and then you're somewhere in between, and all of it is that's just how it goes,
Yeah, and it is something that you just kind of get used to, right? It's
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
part of what business is. It's
exactly.
It's business really is, in a way, especially like entrepreneurship. If it's your own thing, unless you're like coming with like a bunch of venture capital or whatever. But if it's your own thing, you're kind of like gambling a little bit constantly, right?
Right.
Like on yourself, but
Yeah.
also on your clients. Like because how many times in the video world or chocolate world or any world are you you're trusting that these people are going to pay you after you spend your time and energy,
Right.
and resources. I don't know how, happened to me so many times in my video business. I was young and just wanted to get the work. I was, prior to me asking for like, I want some money up front here. I was just like, yeah, of course I'll do it, and I'd hire my crew and we'd go out, and then I'm like, oh man, it's been like 30 days and I haven't been getting paid. Meanwhile, I'm like out all this money.
Right.
But once again, you learn from it.
Yes.
Then you realize, oh, that's why people make you pay up front. Gotcha.
Exactly.
So here's a question. If I were, first a confession. If I came from a family and we owned a chocolate company, I would probably weigh like 900 pounds.
Yeah.
How do you not weigh 900 pounds?
I did.
You did.
Legitimately, this is a true story. I used to weigh 275 pounds,
Okay.
and I'm a short guy, so I was a big boy. I was a big boy. But in 2007, I was like, I was always like the fat, funny guy though, right? So that was just kind of, it was fine.
Yeah.
I didn't mind.
Right.
I was always, everything I did was funny, when you're fat and you're just funny. But as 2007, I was was like, okay, I should probably not. I don't want to die in a couple of years. I want to get into shape. But I hate exercising, and I love food. But I loved theater, and so I started. I was doing a production of a Fiddler on the Roof at Roger Rocca's, and it was a long run. They extended the run, and when you're doing a show, you're forced to exercise. You're dancing 4 hours a night, essentially. And throughout the run of that show, I was starting to, fix eating habits and do all the normal small things you would do. By the end of that show, I had lost, this was, by the time rehearsal to the end of the show, 6 months, I had lost 90 pounds.
Wow.
Nice.
So it was kind of nuts.
The theater workout diet.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
People
New
like,
book
Yeah, they're
next spring by
They're
Max
like,
DeBoss.
what were you eating to lose this weight? And I was like, honestly, I was still eating Taco Bell, just a little bit less.
Yeah.
Instead of like 4 grilled stuffed burritos, I was eating 2 grilled stuffed burritos. And so, but it's a constant. That is a struggle, though. Oh, believe me, there's a lot of eating and spitting out of chocolate because we're constantly tasting things.
Yeah. That's like a
All day.
winemaker. You can't.
Yeah. I mean, we're eating, literally we're tasting things all day, and especially when we're creating new things, which is pretty much all the time. So if you do just constant, so I'll just take little tastes, swirl it around like a winemaker, and we got a little trash can, and so there's a big disgusting looking trash can in the office.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I wonder if you'd tell us a little bit about, you kind of mentioned before, wanting to have this creative outlet and jump into podcasting.
Sure.
And you were one of the, early adopter of that. Mm-hmm. How did that brainchild come about? I know you said you had someone with a friend first, and then what?
Yeah, so we started Bush League. My buddy James and I, we had. I've always loved radio. So I was a weird kid, as you can imagine, maybe. I remember just like I'd sit in my room at this old like red radio, and I just loved just listening to the radio and finding weird. As a kid, I like discovered George Norrie late at night one time, and I was like, this guy's talking about aliens on the radio at night, like. This is amazing. This guy's crazy. So I've always loved radio.
Did you listen to Dr. Demento? Was that
Dr.
one?
Demento. Yeah, just like anything like that. I also, my mom had bought me as a kid all of these, the old like Superman radio shows and Dragnet radio shows.
Yeah, yeah.
So like radio show is just, I love radio. And so it was just kind of like, how can I get into this? At Fresno State, I helped in the with KFSR. I would do some of the, like their, this is KFSR, full spectrum radio, all those sort of things, and learned some of that. I learned in the studio, and so we just kind of wanted to do it, of course, but without a radio station. So it was the podcast is how we started doing it, and we did Bush League for a while, and then around 2011, 2012, we were doing Bush League, and then CMAC downtown, the Community Media Access Collaborative, was kind of being built, and I was part of the kind of initial group to help put together the studio, so pick out the gear and all of that sort of stuff. And so early on, that we had finished, CMAC had been finished, but they needed content. Nobody knew what CMAC was yet. They had nothing to air. And so they came to me and said, hey, Max, I was also at this point, I was teaching at Fresno State, the studio. And so they said, hey, could you put together something that you could produce and run that would, and then your crew could be people who joined CMAC, and then you could teach them. So I was thinking, okay, what is something that I would enjoy doing, that I would enjoy teaching a bunch of random people who join CMAC how to run a TV studio. And so we started a comedy skit show, a half-hour comedy skit show, Saturday Night Live-ish, except much more funny, of course.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And so we recruited a lot of local actors and a lot of people who had improv teams around town, and we called it the No Talent Show. Short for the Fresno Talent Show, but of course, double entendre there. And so every episode would start with a little some improv, and we'd have a live audience, and we would do all the live skits and film them, and with 3 cameras set up and the whole deal. And it was so much fun, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Just a ton of work, and so and eventually I ended up, because I was the studio operations manager at Fresno State. So I eventually moved it to Fresno State because a lot of students were at Fresno State. And I was like, hey, guys, can I just do this at Fresno State instead? I'm like, yeah, sure, as long as we get to air the program.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
So I would teach my class at Fresno State, and it would end, and I'd say, all right, guys, now if you want to stay and learn some more like real stuff besides just what we have in class, we're going to put on a show. So we did that, and we were writing everything, just a couple of us, writing every skit. And then I was the only one who knew how to operate the studio. So I'd be getting there early, getting the studio ready, hanging up the lights, doing all the camera work, getting the wires ready, getting in the booth. And I was also the only one who knew how to run the board because it was a full, 3-camera studio. So we'd get everything going. I was running the board. I was directing. I was also technical directing and doing everything. And then afterwards, I'd have to edit it all together and then put it on the FTP server and get it up to CMAC and then prep for class the next day. And
oh, wow.
So we did that for a while, and I just got burnt out.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't.
Why?
In fact, we still have an unfinished episode. I have all the footage.
Wow.
It's been
Really?
sitting there since 2013.
Wow.
And every once in a while, I'll think, man, maybe I'm going to edit that someday. And I'm like, nah, nobody cares. And so I thought, we're still doing this podcast on the side. And I said, man, how cool would it be if I somehow turned this into like a comedy skit show, like radio show, which was much harder than we thought. So it turned into kind of a round table, what's going on in Fresno sort of show, which eventually transformed into a much more polished the No Focus Radio Hour, where we have a lot of guests on. We try to bring in guests from we've had gubernatorial candidates. We've had people that we find on Reddit who do different things in Fresno. We've had restaurateurs. It's a lot of various people, and so sometimes we'll have guests on and talk through authors and a lot of different people. But it's it's kind of it's really about the Central Valley and more. It's really spread.
Yeah, what do you say for those who live in the Central Valley?
For those who miss the Central Valley, and for those who long to live in the Central Valley.
Yes,
yeah.
perfect.
Which is pretty much everybody.
Exactly,
on the planet.
right?
That covers everybody in the
Covers
world.
everybody. So it's been a lot of fun. So we'll talk. We try to keep it not hyper local, but there's always something that we tie into. So if we're talking about bigger news, we'll somehow tie it into. If there's some big story, if there's some way we can connect it, like, oh, well, that guy, even if it's crazy, that guy looks like the guy who owns that cookie shop. Speaking of which, what are your favorite local cookie stores?
There you go.
We'll tie them in.
Yeah.
And so it's been a lot of fun, and it's kind of been a. It's like you said before, it's something that we were doing for fun, and I was never really expecting a lot of listeners, but it's just really it's grown kind of significantly to the point where now we're actually kind of worried because we're like, we have a lot of people who listen to us, and so now you really have to start being careful about we used to just talk
You could say
openly
whatever you
about
want, yeah.
anything and about our families,
Yeah.
and now we're like, I'll bump into people and they'll bring up things about like my family or what I did, and I'm like, first of all, who are you and what is going on?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you talked about it on the podcast. I'm like, oh, who are you? It's just been this really weird kind of
You're adoring fans.
yeah, it's been strange. So it's been a lot of fun.
You're Fresno famous.
Apparently, I mean, I don't know how many people know how we look, but it's been kind of it's been a very interesting ride to kind of been doing this for so long, and then people will just reach out to us. Hey, we had a couple people running for governor and just sending us, hey, we'd love to be on your show, to kind of get the word out. And I'm like, yes, let me make sure we have space on our guest list.
Move some things around here.
Sorry, we're booked for the next 2 weeks. How about in 3 weeks? It's very strange.
Yeah.
But more and more, it's kind of picking up, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that's great.
It is fun. We have so much fun doing this podcast.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
It's just it's a fun outlet, and really it's kind of started as it's an excuse to hang out with people you like.
Yeah.
Every Thursday I get to hang out with buddies for a couple hours, and
Right.
whether or not, if nobody listens to it, we're still going to be doing it. We'll just hang out and put a microphone in front of us.
Well, and I think it's interesting for us because we've it forces you to kind of think in a little bit different way. So, if you're talking about, something that's related to either what you do, for us, we're kind of talking about stuff that we do in our business, but even if it's just whatever it is, you kind of now have to basically analyze something and think about it in a different way, and you're bouncing ideas off of different people, and so it's been kind of a fun experience, a learning experience,
Right.
All those things, right?
Yeah, it really is, and I'm sure every show, I'm sure you each have your own different backgrounds and life experiences, and same thing with us. We'll bring up an idea. We have one of our cast members, Marty. He's lived a very unique life. He was a submariner with the Marines during the Cold War, and then he was a mortician, and then he was a delivery nurse. So he's done so many things, and so every once in a while we're like, that guy, you're such a liar, man. There's no way, but it's all real, and it's just like, so we'll be talking about something. He'll go, well, actually, and he'll fully explain how they get oxygen in a submarine.
Yeah.
I'm like, I never even thought about that before,
Right.
So you just never know what things are going to come up.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Have you ever used the podcast for marketing the chocolate business?
Kind of. So, Acapella Chocolates is a sponsor of the No Focus Radio Hour. Although this is a tricky one, but because of you never know if anybody on the show is going to say something that might make somebody angry.
Yeah.
So especially with guests on.
Bad PR.
So I'm kind of pulling away from it because, we'll have authors on and things like that. And, I don't know. We had an author on who wrote a great book about Fresno. and it's called something Scumbag. Now I'm forgetting it, but it's a great book. It's about him. He grew up in Fresno. And it's kind of about his journey through the 2000s as a drug addict, and everything, and kind of the crazy stories that happened to him, but also his way out of that and where he is now. And just very well spoken, and is a great podcast. Although there's some foul language and different things like that. And I start going, if it was strictly only my company now, but now that we're associated with kind of a larger corporation, I have to start thinking,
You have this responsibility to
I
other
have a
people.
responsibility now to make sure that somebody doesn't listen to it and then go, wait a second, how come you're associating yourself with blank company? So,
Right. Interesting.
It's all. Speaking of thinking about things differently, I mean, that's really thinking through all these little things now, especially now that we have listeners. It's like I have to start thinking through these things that I never in a million years thought would be an issue. So
Great power comes great responsibility.
So I wish, it's kind of like at the if and when we have like 1 million downloads a week, then maybe I'll rethink it. But in the meantime, kind of not.
Yeah. And I think Neil Young pulled off of Spotify because of your podcast.
This
right?
is true. Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, we actually pulled off his Pono player. You guys remember his
yes.
music?
Yeah.
Yeah, we decided that we were no longer going to be on his Pono player. so.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Take
hurt.
that, Neil Young.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, he's going to regret that. Yeah.
Biggest mistake you'll ever make.
So, Max, thanks again for coming. We have really enjoyed having you. Can you tell our listeners, what few we might have, how they can connect with you outside of the podcast? If they want to buy your chocolate, how do we get a hold of these chocolate morsels here?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can visit acapellachocolate.com for all things chocolate. And you can also find links to chocolate and videos and, poems, a whole bunch of weird stuff that I do at maxdebas.com. That's DEBBAS, maxdebas.com.
And remind us again, how do we get a hold of this podcast that you have?
Yes, you can go. We're on all podcast platforms. You can just search the No Focus Radio Hour, or you can go to nofocusradio.com.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, awesome. Thanks again, Max.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you.
all. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for spending time with us at Extremely Valid Points Podcast. To learn more about this episode, see our show notes at extremelyvalidpoints.com. Be sure and subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. Follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube and Instagram at EVP_podcast.
If you need help with your video for your business or nonprofit, connect with Dave at ellipsispro.co.
And if you need help with digital marketing, Nathan and Jenny can be found at worldlightmedia.com.
Or feel free to send us an email at questions@extremelyvalidpoints.com. Thanks again for joining us. See you next time.